Close your eyes and imagine the scent of cinnamon carried on desert winds. Picture caravans moving like slow rivers across endless horizons, their bells chiming softly in the twilight. Tonight, we journey along the greatest trade route in human history, the Silk Road, where merchants, dreamers, and wanderers carried more than goods between East and West. They carried stories, hopes, and the very essence of human connection across a world that seemed infinite. The Silk Road was never just one road. It was a network of dreams, stretching like veins across continents, pulsing with the heartbeat of commerce and discovery. From the jade gates of ancient China to the marble halls of Constantinople, from the spice markets of Samarkand to the caravanserais of Persia, this was where civilizations touched fingertips across the void. But before we begin this gentle journey through time, if these whispered tales of distant lands speak to your soul, consider subscribing to our channel. Share with us in the comments what other forgotten stories you'd love to hear carried on the night wind. Your voice helps us keep these ancient memories alive. Now, let the world grow quiet around you. Dim the lights. Let your breathing slow. Tonight, you are not merely listening to history. You are walking alongside the merchants who shaped our world, feeling the sand beneath your feet, hearing the distant call of the muezzin, tasting the salt of tears and triumph on lips that spoke 100 languages. The caravan is about to depart. Come walk with us through the mists of time. The first light of dawn breaks over the walls of Chang'an, painting the ancient capital in shades of gold and rose. In the distance, the city's million souls are stirring. But here in the merchant quarter, the day begins differently. The air carries the mingled scents of tea, silk, and the musk of camels, creatures whose patient eyes have witnessed more sunrises than most men will ever see. Jiang Wei adjusts his silk robes, his fingers lingering on the fabric that will soon travel further than most emperors' armies. He is a merchant, but more than that, he is a bridge between worlds. His warehouse holds treasures that speak of distant lands, jade from the rivers of Khotan, where the water runs clear and cold, incense from trees that grow in kingdoms where elephants walk like moving temples, pearls from seas he has never seen but dreams of nightly. The morning ritual begins as it has for generations. The scales are checked, their bronze surfaces gleaming. The silk is examined by fingers that know the difference between the thread spun in Jiangnan and that woven in the workshops of Kashgar. Each bolt tells a story, of mulberry leaves gathered at dawn, of worms that spin dreams into reality, of weavers whose songs become part of the fabric itself. Jiang Wei's father once told him that silk was the earth's way of making moonlight solid. Standing now in the warehouse, watching the morning light dance across bolts of fabric that shimmer like captured starlight, he understands the poetry in those words. This silk will travel roads that stretch beyond the horizon, carried by men who trust in nothing but the wind and their own endurance. The camel bells outside grow louder. Soon the great caravans will form, those patient processions that move like schools of fish across the desert floor. But for now, in this moment before departure, Jiang Wei allows himself to dream. He sees his silk adorning the shoulders of Roman senators, his tea warming the hands of Persian poets, his jade becoming the centerpiece of a Byzantine crown. In the courtyard, his servants prepare the final loads. They work in silence, their movements precise and ritualistic. These men have walked the Silk Road before. They know that every knot tied here might mean the difference between life and death in the Taklamakan desert. They understand that this moment of preparation is sacred, a prayer offered to the gods of journey and return. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the heat that will define the next 1,000 miles. Jiang Wei thinks of his wife, still sleeping in their courtyard home, her dreams perhaps filled with his safe return. He thinks of his children, who will grow taller in his absence, their voices changing like the seasons. But the road calls, as it always does. It calls with the promise of profit, yes, but also with something deeper, the promise of stories. Every merchant who walks the Silk Road returns different than when he left. The desert changes men, the mountains humble them, the cities of the West fill them with wonder they struggle to describe. The caravan master's voice echoes across the compound. The camels are loaded, the guards are armed, the documents are sealed. In an hour they will pass through the gates of Chang'an and begin the journey that will take them across the roof of the world. Jiang Wei takes one last look at his city, its pagodas reaching toward heaven like fingers of prayer. He whispers a blessing to his ancestors, asking them to watch over this journey. Then he steps forward, toward the road that has no end, toward the horizon that promises everything and guarantees nothing. The Silk Road is waking up, and with it, the dreams of 1,000 merchants who believe that somewhere, beyond the next mountain range, beyond the next desert, lies a fortune worth the risk of everything they hold dear. 3 months have passed since the gates of Chang'an disappeared behind them, and now the caravan rests in the shadow of the Tian Shan mountains. The caravanserai of Turpan rises from the desert, like a mirage-made stone, its high walls promising safety in a world where safety is as rare as rain in the Gobi. The courtyard fills with the symphony of arrival, camels groaning as their burdens are lifted, merchants calling out in languages that blend together like colors in a sunset, children laughing as they run between the legs of men who have walked 1,000 miles. This is more than a resting place. It is a temporary city, a crossing point between the known and the unknown. Mahmud the Persian sits cross-legged on a carpet that once graced the palace of Isfahan, his weathered hands cradling a cup of tea that steams in the evening air. His eyes, dark as the space between stars, hold the accumulated wisdom of 40 years on the road. He has seen empires rise and fall, has watched cities bloom in the desert and wither like flowers in drought. The road chooses its own, he says to Jiang Wei, his voice carrying the weight of countless campfire conversations. We think we choose to travel, but the road was calling us before we were born. Around them, the caravanserai comes alive with the rituals of evening. Fires are lit, their flames dancing against the ancient stones. The smell of mutton and rice mingles with the incense that Persian merchants burn to honor their fire god. Somewhere in the darkness, a flute plays a melody that seems to capture the loneliness of infinite spaces. In one corner of the courtyard, a group of Sogdian merchants examine bolts of silk by lamplight, their fingers reading the quality like monks reading sacred texts. They speak in whispers, negotiating prices that will determine profits calculated in months of desert walking. Their language is the lingua franca of the Silk Road, a tongue that borrows from a dozen others, creating something new, a merchant's Esperanto born of necessity and dreams. A young trader from Kashgar approaches their fire, his eyes bright with the fever of first journey. He carries letters from home, written on paper that still smells of the workshop where it was made. These letters are more precious than gold. They are lifelines thrown across the vast distances that separate the merchants from everything they love. Read it aloud, Mahmud suggests gently. The road is long, and we are all far from home. The young man's voice trembles as he reads his mother's words, written in careful script that speaks of long hours spent by lamplight. She tells him of the garden where his favorite apricot tree is blooming, of the neighbor's daughter who asks about him every market day, of the way the morning light still falls across his empty bed. The fire crackles, and in its light, the faces of the merchants blur together. Chinese, Persian, Arab, Indian, the boundaries between peoples seem as insubstantial as smoke. They are all pilgrims on the same journey, all seekers of the same distant shore. An old Arab merchant, his beard white as mountain snow, begins to tell a story. His words paint pictures of the great markets of Baghdad, where the scent of rosewater mingles with the calls of merchants selling treasures from every corner of the world. He speaks of the House of Wisdom, where scholars translate the secrets of the ancients, where Greek philosophy meets Chinese mathematics in scholarly debates that last until dawn. The night deepens, and the stories flow like wine. Each merchant contributes his own memories, the terror of sandstorms that turn day to night, the joy of seeing the walls of Samarkand rise from the plains like a promise kept, the grief of friends lost to bandits, or disease or simple exhaustion. Jiang Wei finds himself thinking of his warehouse in Chang'an, now so distant it seems like something from another life. Here, around this fire, surrounded by men who understand the weight of distance, he feels a different kind of wealth. These stories, these friendships forged in the crucible of shared hardship, they are treasures that cannot be weighed or counted. The stars wheel overhead, their light as ancient as the trade routes below. In the stables, the camels rest, their great patient bodies radiating warmth into the cold desert night. Guards walk the walls, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone. Tomorrow they will load the camels again, will point their faces toward the setting sun, will trust once more in the promise of the road. But tonight, in this moment of perfect suspension between departure and arrival, they are home. The caravanserai holds them like a mother's embrace, and the desert beyond the wall seems as gentle as a sleeping child. The ancient gate rises before them like a poem written in stone, its weathered surface telling stories in a language older than empires. This is Yumen, the Jade Gate, the last threshold between the Middle Kingdom and the vast unknown that stretches beyond the horizon. Here, at the edge of the world they know, the merchants pause in reverence and trepidation. Jiang Wei runs his fingers along the gate's carved surface, feeling the grooves worn smooth by countless hands that have touched this same stone. Traders, soldiers, pilgrims, and adventurers all have passed through this doorway, leaving invisible traces of their hopes and fears embedded in the ancient rock. The wind that blows through the gate carries scents from two worlds. Behind them, the familiar aromas of China, tea gardens and rice fields, incense from temple courtyards, the green smell of bamboo forests. Ahead, the air tastes of something altogether different: salt from distant seas, spices from lands where different gods hold sway, the metallic tang of foreign coins. A customs official, his silk robes rustling in the desert wind, approaches with the careful dignity of bureaucracy. His ledger, bound in leather and sealed with wax, contains the recorded dreams of every merchant who has passed this way. Each entry is a story: bolts of silk destined for Roman ladies, tea leaves that will warm the hands of Persian poets, jade that will become the centerpiece of a Byzantine crown. The inspection is ceremonial, almost ritualistic. The official knows these merchants, has seen them pass through seasons of departure and return. His questions are formalities, but necessary ones. The Middle Kingdom must know what treasures are flowing from its heart to the distant corners of the world. Where do you journey, Jiang Wei of Chang'an? The official's voice carries the weight of official duty, but his eyes hold the warmth of shared understanding. To the western lands, honored sir. To the cities where the sun sets in golden rivers, where merchants gather in covered markets, and the call to prayer echoes from towers that reach toward heaven. The official nods, his brush dancing across the paper as he records the caravan's details. Each stroke of ink is a commitment, a promise that these goods will carry the reputation of the Middle Kingdom to lands so distant they seem mythical. Beyond the gate, the desert stretches like a sea of golden sand, its dunes shifting in patterns that hypnotize the eye. This is the Taklamakan, the desert of no return, where the bones of the ambitious bleach white under the relentless sun. Yet the merchants look upon it not with fear, but with the reverence of those about to undertake a sacred journey. The caravan's departure is marked by ritual. Incense is burned, its smoke rising straight up in the still air like prayers made visible. The merchants bow toward the four directions, honoring the spirits of the road, asking for protection on the journey ahead. The camels, sensing the solemnity of the moment, stand patient and still, their great eyes reflecting the wisdom of creatures who have walked these routes since time immemorial. Mahmud the Persian approaches the gate with something approaching reverence. He has passed through many times, but each crossing feels like the first. "The gate remembers," he says softly. "It remembers every merchant who has passed through, every dream that has traveled this road. We are part of something larger than ourselves, something that began before we were born and will continue after we are dust." The young trader from Kashgar looks back one last time at the familiar world behind the gate. His hometown, his family, his entire known universe suddenly seems as small and precious as a jade figurine. Ahead lies the unknown, vast and terrible and full of promise. The caravan master gives the signal, and the great procession begins to move. Bells chime softly as the camels step forward, their padded feet making no sound on the sand. The merchants walk alongside their animals, their shadows stretching long in the afternoon light. As they pass through the jade gate, each merchant carries with him more than goods. They carry the hopes of families, the dreams of craftsmen, the prayers of wives and children. They carry the essence of one civilization toward another, becoming living bridges across the void that separates east from west. The gate grows smaller behind them, until it becomes a speck on the horizon, until it disappears entirely into the shimmering heat waves of the desert. But its presence remains with them, a reminder of home, a promise of return. The desert wind picks up, and the sand begins to sing its ancient song. The merchants pull their robes closer, adjust their turbans, and settle into the rhythm of walking that will carry them across the roof of the world. The Jade Gate has blessed their journey, and now they are committed to the road, to the promise of distant markets, to the faith that somewhere beyond the next mountain range lies a fortune worth the risk of everything they hold dear. The Taklamakan Desert unfolds around them like a scroll written in sand and silence. Days blur into nights, nights into days, as the caravan moves across landscapes that seem to exist outside of time. The sun rises and sets with the regularity of a cosmic clock, but within the desert's embrace, time becomes something fluid, something that bends and stretches like the heat waves that dance above the dunes. Zhang Wei has learned to read the desert's moods like a scholar reads ancient texts. The morning sand, cool and firm beneath his feet, tells him the night has been peaceful. The afternoon dunes, their surfaces rippling like water, warn of winds that will reshape the landscape by dawn. The evening shadows, long and purple, promise respite from the sun's relentless gaze. The camels have become his teachers in the art of desert living. Their patient gait, never hurried, never slowing, speaks of a wisdom earned through millennia of evolution. They know secrets that humans can only guess at, where to find water in a land that seems waterless, how to navigate by stars that wheel overhead in patterns older than memory, how to endure hardship with a dignity that shames the complaints of men. At night, when the desert sheds its daytime heat like a snake shedding skin, the merchants gather around fires that seem impossibly small beneath the vast dome of stars. The darkness here is different from the darkness of cities. It is complete, absolute, a blackness that makes the stars seem close enough to pluck from the sky. Mahmud the Persian shares stories that blur the line between history and myth. He tells of the buried cities that lie beneath the shifting sands, their palaces and temples sleeping until the desert chooses to reveal them again. He speaks of the merchant prince who found a city of gold and lived there for 7 years, only to wake one morning and find it vanished, leaving him alone in the desert with nothing but memory and madness. The desert is the world's greatest monastery, Mahmud says, his voice barely above a whisper. It strips away everything that is not essential, everything that is not true. In the desert, a man discovers what he really is. The young trader from Kashgar nods. though he does not yet understand the full meaning of these words. He is beginning to feel the desert's strange alchemy, the way it transforms the mind, as surely as sun transforms sand into glass. His thoughts, once filled with the petty concerns of daily life, now range over vast territories of contemplation. Days pass in a rhythm as old as the earth itself, wake before dawn, when the air is cool and the sand firm. Load the camels by the light of dying stars. Walk through the morning hours, when the sun climbs from gentle warmth to punishing heat. Rest through the murderous afternoon, when the desert becomes a furnace and the air shimmers with mirages that promise water where none exists. Resume the journey in the evening, when the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon. Walk into the night, when the desert becomes a different world, cool and mysterious and full of whispered secrets. The merchants learn to treasure small things, a sip of water that tastes better than the finest wine, a patch of shade that feels like a blessing, a moment when the wind stops and the desert holds its breath. They learn that luxury is not silk or gold, but the simple pleasure of cool air on sunburned skin. The desert tests them in ways they never imagined. Sandstorms that rise like walls of fury, turning day to night and forcing the caravan to huddle together like survivors of a shipwreck. Mirages that show lakes and cities and forests, taunting them with visions of everything they lack. The constant grinding presence of heat that saps strength and will, that makes each step forward an act of faith. Yet through it all, the merchants persist. They persist because they have no choice, because the desert allows no retreat, no surrender. They persist because they are part of something larger than themselves, part of the great river of commerce that has flowed between east and west for generations beyond counting. Jiang Wei finds himself changing in ways he cannot name. The daily struggles of his life in Chang'an, the negotiations with suppliers, the worries about profit margins, the social obligations that once seemed so important, all of these fade like morning mist. In their place grows something harder and cleaner, a sense of purpose refined by extremity. The desert strips away illusions, reveals the bedrock of character that lies beneath the accumulation of years. Some merchants break under this pressure, their minds fracturing like pottery in the heat. Others, like metal in a forge, emerge stronger, purified by the ordeal. As the caravan continues its westward journey, the merchants become something new, neither the men they were when they entered the desert, nor the men they will become when they leave it. They are pilgrims in the cathedral of sand and sky, disciples of the harsh teacher that is the Taklamakan. The desert wind carries their prayers across the dunes, and the stars witness their transformation. They are becoming citizens of the Silk Road, members of the brotherhood of those who have looked into the heart of emptiness and found not despair, but a strange, austere joy. After 30 days in the desert's embrace, the sight of green appears on the horizon like a dream made manifest. Khotan rises from the sand like a jewel from a golden setting, its palm trees swaying in the wind like welcoming arms. The merchants quicken their pace, their camels sensing the promise of water and rest, their own hearts lifting at the sight of walls that speak of civilization and safety. The city reveals itself gradually, layer by layer, like a painting being unveiled. First, the outer groves of mulberry trees, their leaves rustling with the sound of silkworms' dreams. Then the irrigated fields, impossibly green after the monochrome of the desert, where farmers work in the early morning light, their movements as rhythmic as prayers. Finally, the walls themselves, built from the same desert sand that has been their constant companion, but here transformed into something protective and permanent. Jiang Wei can smell the city before he sees it clearly, the scent of baking bread, of spices ground fresh in the morning, of water running in channels carved by generations of careful hands. These are the perfumes of civilization, and after a month in the desert, They seem more precious than any incense burned in temple courtyards. The gates of Khotan are guarded by soldiers whose faces reflect the mixed heritage of the Silk Road, Chinese features blended with Persian, Indian eyes in Central Asian faces, the endless mixing of peoples that marks every oasis city. They greet the caravan with the courtesy due to merchants, but also with the wariness of those who have learned that the desert brings both treasure and trouble. The customs house is a marvel of bureaucratic efficiency, its clerks speaking half a dozen languages with equal fluency. They examine the goods with the practiced eyes of men who have seen every treasure the world has to offer pass through their hands. Silk from China, spices from India, precious stones from the mountains of Afghanistan, all are catalogued, taxed, and recorded in ledgers that tell the story of global commerce. But Khotan is more than a way station for merchant caravans. It is a city of artisans, a place where the raw materials of the world are transformed into objects of beauty and value. The workshops that line the narrow streets ring with the sounds of creation, the rhythmic thudding of carpet looms, the scraping of jade carvers' tools, the whispered conversations of silk weavers who guard their techniques like sacred mysteries. In the Jade Quarter, craftsmen work with stones that range from white as fresh snow to green as deep forest shadows. Their fingers, stained with the dust of countless carvings, know the secrets hidden within each piece of stone. They can look at a rough boulder and see the dragon waiting to be freed, the flower that dreams of blooming in immortal jade. The jade of Khotan is legendary throughout the known world. It is said that the stones are born in the marriage of earth and heaven, that they carry within them the essence of eternal harmony. Roman emperors covet these carvings. Byzantine nobles treasure them as symbols of divine favor, and Chinese scholars meditate upon them as windows into the cosmic order. Mahmud the Persian leads Jiang Wei through the maze of workshops and stalls, his knowledge of the city's secrets accumulated over decades of trading. He introduces the Chinese merchant to craftsmen whose grandfathers knew his own grandfather, whose family relationships stretch across the Silk Road like an invisible web of trust and obligation. In one workshop, an old master shows them the process of silk weaving, his hands moving with the precision of a calligrapher writing poetry. The silk here is different from that produced in China. The patterns reflect the cultural mixture of the oasis, incorporating Persian motifs with Chinese techniques, Indian dyes with Central Asian designs. Each piece is unique, a textile poem that tells the story of the Silk Road's cultural synthesis. The young trader from Kashgar finds himself overwhelmed by the city's abundance. After the stark simplicity of the desert, the profusion of colors and sounds and smells seems almost excessive. He wanders through the markets like a man in a dream, his eyes wide with wonder at the goods that flow through this single city, goods that represent the labor and dreams of craftsmen from across the known world. The evenings in Khotan are magical. As the sun sets behind the western mountains, the city comes alive with the sound of music and laughter. In the courtyards of the inns, merchants from a dozen nations gather to share meals and stories. The air is filled with the scent of grilled meat and fresh bread, of wine from distant vineyards, and tea from gardens that exist at the edge of the world. Jiang Wei finds himself in conversation with a Roman trader whose Latin mingles with Persian and Chinese in the easy polyglot of the Silk Road. The man speaks of the markets of Constantinople, of the endless demand for silk among the nobility of the Byzantine Empire, of the profit margins that make the dangers of the journey seem worthwhile. Every bolt of silk that reaches our markets, the Roman says, carries with it the dreams of your people. We do not merely trade in goods, we trade in the aspirations of civilizations. The night deepens, and the stars emerge in their countless thousands. The merchants drift to their rooms, their minds full of the possibilities that tomorrow will bring. Some will continue westward, carrying the goods of Khotan to distant markets. Others will turn back, their camels loaded with the crafts of the oasis, ready to face the desert again with new treasures to sustain them. In the workshops, the craftsmen work by lamplight, their tools creating beauty that will outlast empires. The jade carvers shape stones that will survive the fall of dynasties. The silk weavers create patterns that will be admired by generations yet unborn. Khotan sleeps, but its dreams are vast. It dreams of caravans that stretch to the horizon, of goods that carry the essence of one civilization to another, of the endless human desire to transform the raw materials of the world into objects of beauty and meaning. The oasis rests in the embrace of the desert, a green jewel in a golden setting, a testament to the power of water and will and the eternal human refusal to accept the limitations of environment. Tomorrow some merchants will leave, carrying pieces of Khotan's soul to markets beyond the mountains. But the city will remain, eternal and patient, waiting for the next caravan to emerge from the desert's embrace. The Pamir Mountains rise before them like the backbone of the world, their snow-capped peaks piercing the sky with an audacity that takes the breath away. Here at the roof of the world, the very air seems thinner, as if the gods have drawn it closer to themselves, leaving mortals to struggle with what remains. The caravan has been climbing for days, following paths that seem to have been carved by the footsteps of clouds. The camels, those patient servants of the desert, have been replaced by yaks, shaggy, sure-footed creatures whose breath steams in the thin air, whose eyes hold the wisdom of high places and dangerous passages. Jiang Wei pulls his wool cloak tighter against the wind that cuts through fabric like a blade of ice. The silk robes that marked his status in Chang'an are now hidden beneath layers of practical wool and fur, the elegant markers of civilization surrendered to the demands of survival. Here in this realm of stone and sky, all merchants are equal, equally small, equally vulnerable, equally dependent on the mercy of the mountains. The guide who leads them is a man of the high places, his face weathered by wind and sun until it resembles the granite cliffs that surround them. His name is Tenzin, and he speaks the language of the peaks, a mixture of Tibetan and Persian, Chinese and tongues that have no names, bound together by the shared vocabulary of those who live where the earth touches heaven. The mountains choose who may pass, Tenzin says, his voice barely audible above the wind. We do not conquer them. We ask permission, and sometimes they allow us to continue. The path they follow is older than empires, worn into the rock by countless feet over countless centuries. Merchants, pilgrims, armies, and adventurers have all passed this way, each leaving invisible traces of their passage. The very stones seem to hold memories of Marco Polo's wonder at the vastness of the world, of Buddhist monks carrying sacred texts to distant monasteries, of princes and paupers united in their struggle against the indifferent majesty of the peaks. The young trader from Kashgar struggles with the altitude, his breath coming in short gasps that cloud the air before his face. The desert, which seemed so harsh and unforgiving, now appears gentle by comparison. At least in the Taklamakan a man could breathe. Here every breath is a conscious act, every step a victory over the thin air that makes even the simple act of walking an ordeal. Yet there is beauty here that defies description. The peaks stretch away in all directions, their snow-covered summits gleaming like temples in the morning light. The sky, so close it seems touchable, is a blue so pure it hurts the eyes. The silence is absolute, broken only by the wind and the distant cry of eagles, who ride the thermals with the ease of natural aristocrats. Mahmud the Persian, despite his years, moves with the steady pace of a man who has learned to husband his strength. He has crossed these mountains many times, but each passage still fills him with awe. In the lowlands, he tells Jiang Wei during one of their brief rests, men think they are masters of the world. Here we remember the truth. We are guests in creation, permitted to pass but never to stay. The nights in the high places are brutal. The cold descends like a living thing, seeping through even the thickest furs, finding every gap in their defenses. The merchants huddle together around fires that burn with difficulty in the thin air, their flames pale and weak compared to the robust blazes of lower altitudes. The stars here are different, somehow larger and more numerous than in the desert or the cities. They wheel overhead in patterns that seem to tell stories of creation and destruction, of the endless dance of cosmic forces that dwarf human ambition. The merchants lie on their backs, wrapped in furs, and contemplate the vastness above them, feeling their own significance shrink to a pinpoint of consciousness in the infinite darkness. Food becomes precious at these altitudes. The simple act of cooking requires patience and skill, as water boils at lower temperatures and fires struggle to maintain their heat. The merchants subsist on dried meat and barley flour, tea that tastes of smoke and sacrifice, simple fare that nonetheless seems like a feast when shared among companions who face the same dangers. The passage through the mountains is a test of more than physical endurance. The isolation, the constant threat of avalanche or sudden storm, the disorienting effect of altitude, all combine to strip away the comfortable assumptions of life at sea level. Men discover reserves of strength they never knew they possessed, or find themselves broken by challenges they never imagined. Some merchants do not survive the crossing. The mountains claim them with a casual indifference that is perhaps more terrifying than active malevolence. Their bodies, when they can be recovered, are buried in cairns of stone that mark the passage of the living and serve as warnings to those who follow. But for those who do survive, the mountains offer a gift beyond price, the knowledge that they have faced the ultimate test of the Silk Road and emerged victorious. They carry within them the memory of standing at the roof of the world, of breathing air that has never touched the lowlands, of seeing the earth spread out below them like a map drawn by the gods. The descent, when it finally comes, is almost as treacherous as the ascent. The paths wind through valleys where the wind howls like a trapped spirit, where sudden storms can turn day to night in moments. But gradually, impossibly, the air begins to thicken, the breathing becomes easier, and the green of growing things appears in the distance like a promise of return to the world of men. Jiang Wei looks back once at the peaks they have crossed, their summits lost in clouds that seem to scrape the bottom of heaven. He has been changed by the crossing, marked by the mountains in ways that will never fully leave him. He is no longer merely a merchant from Chang'an. He is a man who has walked the roof of the world and lived to tell the tale. The caravan moves on, carrying its human cargo toward the western lands that wait beyond the next horizon. But the mountains remain eternal and patient, ready to test the next group of travelers who dare to challenge their heights, ready to separate the worthy from the weak, the determined from the merely ambitious. The city appears at dawn like a vision from the tales of Jin and Wonder, its blue-tiled domes catching the first light and throwing it back to the sky in fragments of impossible beauty. Samarkand, the pearl of the world, the crossroads where all dreams converge. After months of desert and mountain, stone and sky, the sight of its walls rising from the fertile plain strikes the merchants like a physical blow of joy and relief. The approach to the city is a procession of wonders. Orchards stretch in all directions, their trees heavy with fruit that seems to glow with inner light. Pomegranates split open to reveal seeds like rubies. Grapes hang in clusters that catch the morning dew like captured stars. The air is sweet with the scent of roses and jasmine, of bread baking in clay ovens, of spices ground fresh in the cool hours before the heat of day. Jiang Wei finds himself weeping without shame, tears of relief and wonder streaming down his face. The hardships of the journey, the desert's burning emptiness, the mountain's brutal cold, The constant threat of bandits and sandstorms, and the thousand small deaths that wait along the Silk Road, all of these fade before the reality of arrival. They have made it. They have reached the Western lands, the markets of legend, the city that exists at the center of the world's commerce. The walls of Samarkand are ancient beyond measure, built and rebuilt by a dozen dynasties, each adding their own layer to the palimpsest of history. Persian bricks rest upon Greek foundations, Arab innovations crown Mongol reconstructions, and over it all the patient work of Uzbek craftsmen, who have turned the city into a poem written in stone and tile. The gates are guarded by soldiers whose armor bears the marks of many battles, but whose faces show the courteous welcome due to merchants who have survived the journey from the eastern lands. They speak the traders' lingua franca with the easy fluency of men who have heard every accent, every dialect, every variation of commercial speech that exists between the Middle Kingdom and the Mediterranean. The customs house is a marvel of organized chaos, its clerks moving with the practiced efficiency of men who process the dreams of the world. They examine goods with the knowledge of generations, their eyes reading the quality of silk with the skill of master weavers, their fingers identifying the source of spices with the precision of alchemists. But it is the marketplace that truly captures the soul of Samarkand. The great bazaar stretches for miles, its covered alleys branching like the veins of a vast organism. Here the products of the known world meet and mingle in a symphony of commerce that has played without interruption for over 1,000 years. Chinese silk hangs beside Persian carpets. Indian spices perfume the air while Arab incense burns in brass censers that gleam like captured sunlight. Byzantine gold changes hands alongside Tibetan turquoise, and the voices of merchants create a polyglot symphony that speaks the universal language of profit and possibility. Zhang Wei moves through the bazaar like a man in a trance, his eyes wide with wonder at the abundance that surrounds him. The silk he has carried so carefully across desert and mountain is here examined by buyers whose expertise exceeds even his own. They run the fabric through their fingers with the reverence of musicians touching the strings of a perfect instrument, their faces lighting up as they recognize the quality that only the finest workshops of Chang'an can produce. The negotiations begin slowly, ceremonially, like a dance whose steps have been perfected over centuries. Tea is served in glasses that catch the light like liquid amber. Compliments are exchanged with the gravity of diplomatic protocol. The weather is discussed, the health of families inquired after, the general state of the world examined with the wisdom of men who have seen much and understand the fragility of all human endeavor. Only after these rituals are complete do the merchants begin to speak of business. Prices are mentioned with the delicacy of poets choosing words, quantities discussed with the precision of astronomers calculating the movements of stars. Each number is a negotiation, each figure a small battle in the larger war of commerce. Mahmud the Persian finds himself at home in these negotiations as a fish finds itself at home in water. His years on the road have taught him the languages of commerce, the subtle signals that indicate flexibility or firmness, the moments when silence speaks louder than words. He moves between Chinese and Persian buyers like a diplomat shuttling between courts, his presence adding weight to the negotiations, his reputation lending credibility to the goods he represents. The young trader from Kashgar watches these proceedings with the intensity of a student studying sacred texts. This is his education in the higher mysteries of the Silk Road, the transformation of raw goods into profit, the alchemy that turns risk into reward. He sees how a bolt of silk purchased for silver in Chang'an becomes gold in Samarkand, how the months of hardship and danger are distilled into margins that make the journey worthwhile. But Samarkand offers more than mere commerce. It is a city of learning, where scholars from across the known world gather to share knowledge that transcends the boundaries of nations and empires. In the madrasas and libraries, Greek mathematics mingles with Indian astronomy. Chinese medicine learns from Arab surgery, and Persian poetry inspires verses in a dozen languages. In the evening, when the heat of the day subsides and the city comes alive with the sound of fountains and laughter, the merchants are invited to feast in the homes of their hosts. These dinners are ceremonies of hospitality that honor the courage required to cross the world in search of trade. The food is a symphony of flavors: rice perfumed with saffron, lamb tender enough to cut with a spoon, fruits that taste like condensed sunshine. The conversation flows as freely as the wine, ranging across topics that span the breadth of human knowledge. The merchants share news from the eastern lands, of emperors and wars, of new trade routes and old alliances, of the thousand small changes that mark the passage of time in distant capitals. Their hosts reciprocate with tales of the western lands, of the great markets of Constantinople and Baghdad, of the sea routes that carry goods to ports whose names sound like music. Jiang Wei finds himself seated beside a scholar whose library contains manuscripts in languages he cannot read, whose knowledge encompasses the wisdom of civilizations that existed before his own empire was born. The man speaks of the translators who work in the scriptoriums of Samarkand, rendering the classics of one culture into the languages of another, building bridges of understanding that span the chasms between peoples. Knowledge is like water, the scholar says, his words flavored with the accent of many lands. It flows where it will, finding its own level, recognizing no boundaries, save those imposed by ignorance and fear. Here in Samarkand, we serve as the cup that catches knowledge from every source, preserving it for future generations who will thirst for wisdom. The night deepens, and the merchants retire to chambers that seem luxurious beyond measure, after months of sleeping on hard ground under open sky. The beds are soft with silk cushions, the walls decorated with carpets that tell stories in their patterns, the windows open to courtyards where nightingales sing in languages that need no translation. But even in comfort, sleep comes slowly. The merchants lie awake, their minds processing the reality of arrival, the success of their journey, the profits that await conversion into the goods that will carry them home. They have achieved what they set out to achieve. They have reached the Western markets, have sold their goods for prices that exceed their most optimistic projections. Yet already some are thinking of the return journey, of the new goods they will purchase with their profits, of the stories they will tell in the tea houses of Chang'an. The Silk Road has marked them, changed them, made them citizens of a larger world than the one they knew when they began their journey. Samarkand sleeps around them, its domes and minarets silver in the moonlight, its fountains murmuring secrets to the night wind. The Pearl of the World dreams its ancient dreams, of caravans that stretch to the horizon, of goods that carry the essence of distant lands, of the endless human desire to reach beyond the known, to risk everything in pursuit of dreams that glitter like stars in the desert night. The marketplace of Samarkand at dawn is a symphony of preparation, as merchants who have sold the treasures of the East now purchase the wonders of the West. The air fills with the rustle of different fabrics, the clink of unfamiliar coins, the musical tones of languages that will soon travel thousands of miles to be heard in tea houses and palaces across the Middle Kingdom. Jiang Wei moves through the stalls with the measured pace of a man who has learned patience from the desert, wisdom from the mountains. His purse, heavy with the gold earned from months of successful trading, represents more than mere profit. It is the distilled essence of risk transformed into reward, of dreams made tangible in metal that catches the morning light like crystallized ambition. The goods available here speak of civilizations that exist beyond the farthest reach of Chinese imagination. Carpets from Persia that capture entire gardens in their woven threads, each knot a flower that will never fade. Glassware from Damascus that transforms simple light into rainbow prisms, vessels so delicate They seem to be made from crystallized breath. Precious stones from the mines of Afghanistan, emeralds and sapphires that hold trapped starlight in their depths. The young trader from Kashgar stands before a stall filled with astronomical instruments, his eyes wide with wonder at the brass astrolabes and celestial globes that map the heavens with mathematical precision. The craftsman who made these treasures explains their use in the patient tones of a teacher, showing how the movements of stars can be predicted, how the vast clockwork of the cosmos can be understood and measured. In the West, the craftsman says, his Arabic flavored with the accents of many lands, we have learned to read the sky as your people read books. These instruments carry the wisdom of Greek philosophers and Arab mathematicians, Persian astronomers, and Indian calculators. Each one is a library of cosmic knowledge, small enough to carry in a saddlebag. Mahmud the Persian guides his companions through the labyrinth of commerce with the sure step of long experience. He knows which merchants can be trusted, which goods will find ready markets in the eastern lands, which prices represent genuine value rather than mere profit-taking. His introductions open doors, his recommendations carry the weight of decades spent building relationships that span continents. In the textile quarter, Zhang Wei examines bolts of fabric that tell the story of Western craftsmanship. Persian silk, woven with patterns that incorporate Arabic calligraphy as decorative elements, each letter a prayer made visible in thread. Byzantine brocades that combine Greek geometric precision with Oriental flowing lines, creating designs that satisfy both the mathematical mind and the aesthetic soul. The carpet merchants spread their wares like illuminated manuscripts on the ground, each rug a page from the book of Persian culture. The patterns tell stories older than memory, of gardens that exist only in paradise, of hunts in forests where mythical beasts roam free, of geometric forms that represent the mathematical perfection underlying creation itself. The dyes used to create these masterpieces come from sources as exotic as their destinations. Cochineal from insects that live on distant cacti, indigo from plants that grow in secret valleys, gold thread spun from metal beaten so thin it becomes flexible as hair. The spice merchants offer treasures that will transform the cuisine of the East. Saffron from Persia, more valuable than gold, its stigmas hand-picked from flowers that bloom for only a few precious days each year. Cardamom from India, its seeds holding the concentrated essence of tropical forests. Cinnamon from islands so distant they exist at the edge of the world, its bark peeled from trees that grow where the ocean meets the sky. But it is not only goods that the merchants purchase in Samarkand. They buy knowledge, techniques for working with new materials, recipes for dyes and perfumes, mathematical formulas that will revolutionize engineering in the Middle Kingdom. They buy relationships, connections with Western merchants who will facilitate future trades, partnerships that will survive the rise and fall of empires. The loading of the return caravan is a ceremony as elaborate as the negotiations that preceded it. Each item is wrapped with the care due to objects that must survive months of travel across some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. The carpets are rolled in oiled leather, the glassware nestled in silk and wool, the precious stones sewn into hidden pockets that thieves will never think to search. The camels that will carry these treasures eastward are different from those that brought silk westward. These are animals bred for the harsh conditions of the return journey, their endurance tested by generations of breeding, their disposition sweetened by careful training. They stand patient in the morning light, their great eyes reflecting the wisdom of creatures who have walked the Silk Road since time immemorial. The farewell ceremonies begin at sunset, when the heat of the day gives way to the gentle warmth of evening. The merchants who are staying in Samarkand gather to honor those who are departing, their toasts spoken in languages that span the breadth of human civilization. Wine flows like liquid poetry, its vintage carrying the essence of vineyards that exist in valleys where different gods hold sway. Jiang Wei finds himself embraced by men who were strangers 6 months ago, but who have become brothers through shared hardship and mutual profit. The bonds forged in the crucible of the Silk Road transcend nationality and religion, creating a fellowship that exists outside the normal boundaries of human society. The Persian merchant who bought his finest silk presses a small gift into his hands, a miniature astrolabe, its brass surface engraved with verses from Rumi, its function both practical and poetic. For navigation, the man says with a smile, both of the stars and of the soul. As night deepens over Samarkand, the preparations for departure reach their climax. The caravan master checks the loads one final time, his experienced eye measuring the weight distribution that will determine the success or failure of the journey ahead. The guards oil their weapons and count their arrows, their faces bearing the calm resolution of men who know that their vigilance stands between the merchants and the dangers that wait in the empty spaces between cities. The young trader from Kashgar looks back at the city that has expanded his understanding of the world beyond all previous boundaries. Samarkand has taught him that the earth is larger than he ever imagined, that human civilization extends far beyond the borders of any single empire, that wonder and beauty exist in forms he never dreamed possible. Tomorrow they will begin the long journey home, carrying with them the treasures of the West and the memories of a city that exists at the crossroads of the world. But tonight, in this moment suspended between departure and arrival, they are citizens of Samarkand, residents of the Pearl of the World, participants in the grand exchange that has connected civilizations since men first learned to dream of distant shores. The stars wheel overhead in their eternal patterns, and the merchants sleep their last night in the city of wonders, their dreams filled with the road that stretches eastward like a promise of home. The ancient city of Merv rises from the Kopet Dag foothills like a hymn written in mud, brick, and ambition, its walls encompassing centuries of human striving in the space between river and desert. Here, where the waters of the Murghab River create an emerald ribbon of life across the tawny landscape, the eastbound caravan pauses to rest and trade in the shadow of minarets that have watched empires rise and crumble like sandcastles before the tide of time. The approach to Merv is through gardens that seem impossible in this land of sparse rainfall and harsh summers. Pomegranate trees heavy with fruit like crimson lanterns line the irrigation channels, their branches offering shade to travelers who have known only the merciless exposure of open desert. The scent of roses mingles with the dust of the caravan road, creating a perfume that speaks of civilization's triumph over the natural world's indifference. Jiang Wei breathes deeply of this sweetened air, his lungs grateful for moisture after the dry winds of the high desert. The goods he carries now are different from those he bore westward. Persian carpets that capture entire universes in their woven patterns, astronomical instruments that map the heavens with mathematical precision, glassware so delicate it seems spun from crystallized breath itself. The customs house of Merv bears the architectural fingerprints of a dozen cultures, its original Sassanid foundations supporting Islamic arches, its walls decorated with Chinese influences brought by merchants like himself over generations of peaceful trade. The officials who examine his goods speak with the multilingual fluency of men who serve at the crossroads of the world, their questions probing but respectful, their taxation fair by the standards of a city that prospers through commerce rather than conquest. In the great library of Merv, scholars work by lamplight even in the heat of day, their fingers tracing texts that preserve the wisdom of civilizations that have vanished like morning mist. Here Greek philosophy is translated into Arabic, Persian poetry finds expression in Chinese characters, and Indian mathematics mingles with Egyptian astronomy to create new syntheses of human knowledge. The head librarian, a man whose beard flows white as mountain snow, and whose eyes hold the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime spent among books, welcomes Jiang Wei with the courtesy due to one who carries knowledge as well as goods. The Chinese merchant has brought with him texts on silk production, medical treatises that describe the use of herbs unknown in the Western lands, and geographical accounts of territories that exist beyond the reach of Arab travelers. Knowledge is the only cargo that grows heavier with distance, the librarian observes, his voice carrying the weight of years spent in contemplation. Each mile it travels, each mind it touches, adds to its value rather than diminishing it. You carry with you the thoughts of men who will never see our city, yet their ideas will take root here and grow in ways they could never imagine. The young trader from Kashgar finds himself overwhelmed by the intellectual sophistication of Merv. In the madrasas and schools, he observes students debating questions that span the breadth of human inquiry, the nature of justice, the movement of celestial bodies, the proper techniques for metallurgy and medicine. These discussions take place in Arabic, but incorporate ideas from Greek and Persian, Chinese and Indian sources, creating a cosmopolitan synthesis that transcends the boundaries of any single culture. Mahmud the Persian moves through Merv with the easy familiarity of long acquaintance. He has friends here, merchants and scholars, craftsmen and officials, whose relationships with him span decades of mutual respect and profitable collaboration. Through his introductions, Jiang Wei gains access to circles normally closed to foreign merchants, invited to dinners where the conversation ranges across topics that illuminate the interconnected nature of human civilization. At one such gathering, held in the courtyard of a merchant's house where fountains provide the sound of running water and the scent of jasmine fills the evening air, Jiang Wei finds himself in conversation with a group of men whose knowledge spans the known world. There is a map maker, whose charts incorporate information gathered from merchants like himself, a physician who combines Greek medical theory with Persian herb lore and Chinese acupuncture techniques, and a philosopher who seeks to reconcile Islamic theology with Aristotelian logic. We live in an age of synthesis, the philosopher explains, his words measured and precise. The barriers between civilizations are dissolving like salt in water. Ideas flow along the same routes as goods, and the mingling of cultures creates new possibilities for human understanding. You merchants are the agents of this transformation, carrying not merely silk and spices, but the very thoughts and dreams of distant peoples. The markets of Merv offer goods that reflect this cultural synthesis. Persian carpets incorporate Chinese motifs, Arabic metalwork shows Indian influences, and textiles blend techniques from across the known world. The merchants who sell these wares speak of their origins with the pride of craftsmen, who understand that their work represents the culmination of centuries of cultural exchange. Jiang Wei purchases items that will amaze the scholars and nobles of Chang'an. Books bound in leather that describe the mathematics of infinity, astrolabes that can predict eclipses with precision, and medicinal compounds that combine herbs from a dozen different climates. Each purchase is an investment not merely in profit, but in the expansion of human knowledge. The glassmakers of Merv create vessels that seem to capture light itself, their techniques derived from Roman methods refined by Islamic innovations and influenced by Chinese aesthetic principles. The resulting glassware possesses a beauty that transcends mere function, each piece a meditation on the nature of transparency and reflection, solidity and fragility. In the evenings, when the heat of the day gives way to the gentle warmth of night, the merchants gather in the courtyards of the caravanserais to share stories and plan the next stages of their journeys. The atmosphere is one of profound contentment, the satisfaction of successful trade, combined with the deeper pleasure of intellectual stimulation and cultural exchange. The young trader from Kashgar has filled his journal with observations that will occupy his thoughts for years to come. He writes of the library where knowledge from across the world is preserved and synthesized, of the scholars who debate questions that challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality, of the craftsmen who create beauty from the marriage of different cultural traditions. As the caravan prepares to depart Merv, Jiang Wei feels the weight of more than mere goods in his baggage. He carries with him ideas that will transform his understanding of the world, relationships that will influence his future business dealings, and memories of a city where human civilization reveals its highest possibilities. The walls of Merv recede into the distance, but their influence travels with the eastbound caravan. In the goods they carry, in the knowledge they have acquired, in the relationships they have forged, the merchants bear witness to the power of peaceful exchange to transform not merely individual fortunes, but the very character of human civilization itself. The road stretches ahead, leading back toward the rising sun, toward home and family, and the familiar comforts of the Middle Kingdom. But the merchants who travel it are no longer the same men who departed Chang'an so many months ago. They have been changed by their encounters with the wider world, enriched by their exposure to different ways of thinking and being, transformed by their participation in the great conversation between civilizations that is the true treasure of the Silk Road. The approach to Isfahan unfolds like a manuscript illuminated by angels, its gardens and orchards spreading across the valley floor in patterns that speak of Persian genius for transforming desert into paradise. The Zayande River runs through the city, like a silver thread binding together a tapestry of impossible beauty, its waters reflecting the soaring arches of bridges that seem to float above their own reflections like architectural dreams made manifest. Jiang Wei's breath catches in his throat as the caravan crests the final hill and the full splendor of Isfahan reveals itself below. After months of travel through landscapes that test the limits of human endurance, the sight of this garden city strikes him with the force of revelation. Here is proof that human imagination, given water and will, can create beauty that rivals the work of creation itself. The city's walls are built from brick that catches the morning light and throws it back in shades of rose and gold, their surfaces decorated with tile work that transforms geometric patterns into visual music. The domes and minarets that rise above the walls seem to float against the sky like captured clouds, their surfaces blue as deep water, blue as the space between stars. The customs officials who greet the caravan at the gates speak Persian with the liquid beauty of poets, their words flowing like water over polished stones. They examine the goods with the appreciation of men who understand that commerce and beauty are not opposing forces, but different aspects of the same divine creativity that transforms raw materials into objects of wonder and utility. The Isfahan Bazaar stretches beneath vaulted ceilings that rise like inverted heavens, their surfaces decorated with star patterns that seem to pulse with inner light. Here, in corridors that echo with the voices of merchants from across the known world, the accumulated treasures of human creativity are displayed with the reverence due to sacred objects. Persian carpets hang like illuminated pages from a book written by jinn and angels, their patterns telling stories that predate the written word. The weavers who created these masterpieces worked with the patience of monks copying sacred texts, their fingers following designs that encode the mathematical secrets underlying creation itself. Each knot is a prayer, each color a meditation on the infinite varieties of beauty that flow from the marriage of human skill and divine inspiration. The young trader from Kashgar stands transfixed before a carpet that depicts the Garden of Paradise, its woven flowers so realistic they seem to release fragrance into the air. The merchant who owns this treasure explains the symbolism embedded in its design, the four rivers that flow from the center, representing the source of all life, the cypress trees that speak of immortality, the roses that bloom eternal in the realm beyond time. This carpet, the merchant says, his voice soft with reverence, was woven by a master who spent 7 years learning to see paradise before he dared to recreate it in silk and wool. Each morning, he would sit in meditation until the vision came clear, then work until evening translated that vision into knots and colors. When it was finished, he wept for 3 days. Whether from joy or sorrow at its completion, none could say. Mahmud the Persian moves through these bazaars like a man returning to his spiritual home. Though he was born in distant Nishapur, Isfahan represents the flowering of Persian civilization, the place where poetry and mathematics, mysticism and commerce, architecture and astronomy combine to create a culture of unprecedented sophistication and beauty. He leads Jiang Wei to the workshop of a master calligrapher whose pen transforms words into visual symphonies. The walls are covered with examples of his art, verses from Hafez that dance across the page like dervishes in ecstasy, Quranic passages that flow like water while maintaining the precise geometric relationships demanded by sacred text, secular poetry that captures the essence of Persian longing for the infinite, in letters that seem to breathe with life. Calligraphy, the master explains as his reed pen glides across the paper with the grace of a bird in flight, is the art of making the invisible visible. These words existed in the realm of pure meaning before I gave them form. My task is not to create, but to serve as a bridge between the world of ideas and the world of matter. The astronomical instruments crafted in Isfahan represent the culmination of centuries of scientific development. The astrolabes and armillary spheres produced here incorporate innovations from Greek, Arab, Persian, and Indian sources, creating tools that map the heavens with unprecedented precision. Jiang Wei purchases several of these instruments, knowing that they will revolutionize navigation and timekeeping in the Middle Kingdom. In the workshops where these scientific marvels are created, craftsmen work with the precision of surgeons and the inspiration of poets. They understand that the instruments they create serve not merely practical purposes, but function as physical manifestations of humanity's desire to comprehend the cosmic order. Each graduated scale, each carefully calculated angle, represents a small victory in the eternal human struggle to understand our place in the vast machinery of creation. The gardens of Isfahan provide respite from the intensity of the bazaars, their pathways winding between fountains that fill the air with the music of falling water and the scent of roses that seem to bloom in defiance of the desert that surrounds the city. These gardens follow the Persian pattern of paradise, geometric precision softened by the organic curves of growing things, mathematical order made beautiful by the unpredictable variations of natural growth. Jiang Wei walks these pathways in the evening light, his mind struggling to process the wealth of beauty and knowledge he has encountered in this single city. The poems carved into the pavilion walls speak of longing and fulfillment, of the soul's journey toward union with the divine, of the eternal human quest for meaning in a universe that reveals its secrets slowly and only to those who approach with humility and wonder. In the merchant's quarter, he's invited to dine in the home of a silk trader whose family has dealt with Chinese merchants for generations. The evening meal is served in a courtyard where the sound of fountains mingles with the music of oud and santur, creating an atmosphere of profound peace and contentment. The conversation ranges across topics that illuminate the interconnected nature of human civilization. The host speaks of the influence of Chinese poetry on Persian verse, of the way Buddhist meditation practices have influenced Sufi mysticism, of the mathematical innovations that flow along the trade routes as surely as silk and spices. "We are all students in the University of the Silk Road," he observes, his words flavored with the wine of Shiraz. "Each caravan that passes through our city brings with it new knowledge, new ways of seeing, new possibilities for human understanding. You carry more than goods in your saddlebags. You carry the thoughts and dreams of distant peoples, the accumulated wisdom of civilizations that exist beyond our immediate horizon. As the evening deepens and the stars emerge in their countless thousands above the garden walls, Jiang Wei feels the profound satisfaction that comes from successful commerce combined with intellectual and aesthetic fulfillment. Isfahan has provided him not merely with goods that will earn substantial profits in the markets of Chang'an, but with experiences that will enrich his understanding for the remainder of his life. The young trader from Kashgar sits beside the fountain, his journal open on his lap, struggling to find words adequate to describe the wonders he has witnessed. How can mere language capture the beauty of carpets that seem woven from crystallized poetry? The precision of instruments that map the movements of celestial bodies, the elegance of architecture that transforms mundane brick into visions of paradise. The night air carries the scent of jasmine and the distant sound of poetry being recited in gardens where scholars gather to explore the mysteries of existence. Isfahan sleeps, but its dreams are vast, dreams of beauty that transcends cultural boundaries, of knowledge that flows like water to fill every empty space, of the human capacity to create wonder from the raw materials of earth and fire, water and air. Tomorrow, the caravan will depart, carrying with it the treasures of Persian civilization toward the markets of the East. But the influence of Isfahan will travel with them in ways both tangible and invisible, in the goods they carry, in the knowledge they have acquired, in the expanded understanding of human possibility that comes from witnessing a civilization at the height of its creative powers. The Persian Gulf lies not far to the south, and beyond it, the sea routes that connect Isfahan to ports where ships wait to carry goods to distant shores. But for now, in this moment suspended between day and night, between departure and arrival, the merchants rest in the embrace of a city that has transformed the desert into paradise, that has proved the power of human imagination to create beauty from the marriage of practical necessity and visionary aspiration. The morning mist rises from the Euphrates like the breath of sleeping giants, and through this veil of silver and gold, the walls of Baghdad emerge, as if materializing from the dreams of caliphs and the prayers of poets. Here, at the heart of the Abbasid Empire, where the Tigris and Euphrates converge like two thoughts becoming one, the eastbound caravan approaches the greatest center of learning the world has ever known. Jiang Wei adjusts his position on the lead camel, his body now molded by months of travel into the rhythm of the road. The goods he carries have been transformed through trade into treasures that will astound the scholars and nobles of Chang'an. Persian carpets that capture entire universes in their patterns, astronomical instruments that map the heavens with divine precision, books bound in leather that contain the distilled wisdom of civilizations. The approach to Baghdad is through date palm groves that stretch to the horizon, their fronds rustling with sounds like distant applause. The irrigation canals that feed these oases are marvels of engineering, their mathematical precision reflecting the same genius that has made this city the center of the Islamic world's intellectual flowering. The young trader from Kashgar rides in wondering silence, his journal now thick with observations that chronicle his transformation from provincial merchant to citizen of the wider world. In his saddlebags rest letters of introduction written in Arabic script that flows like crystallized music, testimonials to his character from scholars in Merv and Isfahan who have recognized in him the hunger for knowledge that transcends mere commercial ambition. The gates of Baghdad rise before them like pages from an illuminated manuscript, their surfaces decorated with calligraphy that transforms Quranic verses into visual symphonies. The guards who examine their documents speak Arabic with the cultured accents of men who serve at the crossroads of empire, their questions probing but respectful, their manner reflecting the cosmopolitan sophistication of a city that draws its strength from diversity. The customs house bears witness to Baghdad's role as the commercial heart of the Islamic world. Officials record goods that arrive from China and India, from Byzantium and the African kingdoms, from the distant islands where spice trees grow, and the cold northern lands where amber is found on lonely beaches. Each entry in their ledgers represents a thread in the vast web of commerce that connects the civilized world. But it is not the bazaars that call most strongly to Jiang Wei's soul. It is the House of Wisdom, that legendary institution where the accumulated knowledge of humanity is preserved, studied, and advanced by scholars whose minds span the breadth of human inquiry. Here, Greek philosophy is reconciled with Islamic theology, Indian mathematics mingles with Persian astronomy, and Chinese medicine finds expression in Arabic treatises that will influence healing practices for centuries to come. The director of translation receives the Chinese merchant with the courtesy due to one who carries knowledge as well as goods. His office is lined with manuscripts in a dozen scripts, Greek texts rescued from Byzantine libraries, Sanskrit works copied in Indian monasteries, Persian poetry that captures the essence of mystical experience, Chinese technical manuals that describe innovations unknown in the Islamic world. We live in the age of synthesis, the director explains, his fingers caressing the spine of a volume that contains Aristotle's logic translated into Arabic. The barriers between civilizations are dissolving like morning mist. Knowledge flows along the same routes as silk and spices, and the mingling of ideas creates possibilities for human understanding that no single culture could achieve alone. Mahmud the Persian, now in the final stages of his trading career, walks through Baghdad with the measured pace of a man who has seen the wheel of fortune complete many revolutions. He has friends here, merchants and scholars, craftsmen and officials, whose relationships with him span decades of mutual respect and profitable collaboration. Through his introductions, Jiang Wei gains access to circles normally closed to foreign merchants. In the workshop of a master papermaker, they observe the creation of the material that makes possible the preservation and dissemination of knowledge. The craftsman explains the process by which rags and plant fibers are transformed into sheets that can hold the thoughts of philosophers and the calculations of mathematicians. This paper, lighter and more durable than silk, cheaper and more practical than parchment, represents one of the innovations that is revolutionizing the preservation of human knowledge. Before paper, the craftsman says, his hands working with the skill born of decades of practice, knowledge was luxury available only to the wealthy. Now the thoughts of the wisest men can be multiplied and distributed to any who hunger for learning. This simple sheet you see before you will carry ideas across continents and centuries, ensuring that human wisdom accumulates rather than disappears with each generation. The Astronomical Observatory of Baghdad houses instruments that represent the pinnacle of scientific achievement. Here scholars map the movements of planets with precision that surpasses the work of their Greek predecessors, their calculations refined by mathematical techniques derived from Indian sources and observational methods learned from Persian astronomers. Jiang Wei purchases several treatises on astronomy and mathematics, knowing that they will introduce revolutionary concepts to Chinese scholars. The algebraic methods developed by Islamic mathematicians, the trigonometric tables that enable precise celestial calculations, the geographic coordinates that map the known world with unprecedented accuracy, all represent advances that will transform understanding in the Middle Kingdom. The Medical School of Baghdad combines theoretical knowledge with practical training in ways that produce physicians whose skills exceed those of any previous age. Here students learn surgical techniques from treatises that describe procedures unknown to classical authors, study pharmacology that incorporates medicinal knowledge from across the known world, and practice diagnostic methods that combine Greek systematic thinking with Persian empirical observation. In the workshops of the goldsmiths and metalworkers, Zhang Wei observes the creation of objects that combine utility with beauty in ways that transform mere function into art. The astrolabes and armillary spheres produced here serve not merely as scientific instruments, but as physical manifestations of humanity's desire to comprehend the cosmic order. Each graduated scale, each carefully calculated angle, represents a small victory in the eternal human struggle to understand our place in the vast machinery of creation. The evenings in Baghdad are spent in gatherings that illuminate the international character of Islamic civilization. In the houses of merchants and scholars, men from across the known world share meals and conversation that range across topics spanning the breadth of human knowledge. Chinese merchants exchange ideas with Arab philosophers, Persian poets debate with Byzantine theologians, and Indian mathematicians collaborate with African astronomers. The young trader from Kashgar finds himself overwhelmed by the intellectual sophistication of these gatherings. The conversations challenge assumptions he has held since childhood, introduce concepts that expand his understanding of the possible, and reveal the arbitrary nature of the boundaries that divide human knowledge into separate compartments. As the caravan prepares to depart Baghdad, Zhang Wei feels the weight of more than goods in his baggage. He carries manuscripts that will revolutionize Chinese understanding of mathematics and astronomy, letters that will establish commercial relationships spanning continents, and memories of a city where human civilization reveals its highest possibilities. The walls of Baghdad recede into the distance, but their influence travels with the eastbound caravan. In the knowledge they have acquired, in the relationships they have forged, in the expanded understanding they carry, the merchants bear witness to the power of peaceful exchange to transform not merely individual fortunes, but the very character of human consciousness itself. The road stretches ahead, leading through landscapes that will test their endurance once more before delivering them to the familiar territories of home. But the merchants who travel it are no longer the same men who departed Chang'an in what now seems another lifetime. They have been transformed by their encounter with the wider world, enriched by their exposure to different ways of thinking and being, made citizens of a civilization that transcends the boundaries of any single empire or culture. The walls of Chang'an rise from the morning mist, like a dream half remembered from another life, their familiar silhouette striking the returning merchants with emotions too complex for words. Joy mingles with melancholy, relief with a strange sense of loss, as men who have walked the edge of the world return to the center of their known universe. Zhang Wei's hands tremble as he adjusts his reins, the weight of 2 years' absence pressing against his chest like a physical thing. The city that was once the entirety of his world now seems both smaller and more precious, its pagodas and palaces taking on the quality of precious jade figurines viewed through tears of homecoming. The camels that carry them toward the gates move with the same patient gait that carried them across deserts and mountains, but their cargo now tells a different story. Where once they bore silk and tea eastward toward unknown markets, now they carry carpets that capture Persian dreams in woven threads, astronomical instruments that map the movements of celestial bodies with mathematical precision, and books bound in leather that contain the distilled wisdom of civilizations that exist beyond the western horizon. The young trader from Kashgar, no longer young in any sense but years, rides in silence, his journal thick with observations that chronicle his transformation from provincial merchant to citizen of the world. His eyes, once bright with the uncomplicated enthusiasm of first adventure, now hold depths that speak of deserts crossed and mountains conquered, of cities that exist like jewels in the vast setting of the earth. The customs officials who greet them at the gates speak Chinese that sounds strange to ears accustomed to the polyglot symphony of the Silk Road. Their questions, once routine, now seem quaint in their assumption that the world beyond these walls is somehow less real, less significant, than the empire that lies within them. "What news from the Western lands?" the chief official asks, his brush poised over paper that will record their return for the imperial archives. Jiang Hui pauses, his mind struggling to compress 2 years of wonder and hardship into words that will fit within the narrow confines of official language. How can he describe the mathematical precision of Islamic architecture, the mystical intensity of Persian poetry, the cosmopolitan sophistication of cities where scholars from across the known world gather to advance human understanding? "The Western lands prosper," he says finally, the inadequacy of the words weighing heavy on his tongue. "Their merchants are eager for our goods, and their own products find ready markets among those who appreciate quality and craftsmanship." The official nods and makes his notation, unaware that he has just recorded one of the greatest understatements in the history of bureaucracy. Jiang Hui's actual cargo manifest tells a truer story. Astronomical instruments that will revolutionize Chinese understanding of celestial mechanics, medical texts that incorporate healing knowledge from across the known world, and mathematical treatises that will advance Chinese scholarship by centuries. Mahmud the Persian, now grey-bearded and bent with the weight of years and miles, moves through the customs process with the patient dignity of a man who has made this journey more times than he can remember. This will be his final crossing, his last caravan, the end of a career that has spanned 4 decades and touched 3 continents. He carries with him letters from merchants in Samarkand and Isfahan, Damascus and Baghdad, men who consider him not merely a trading partner, but a brother forged in the crucible of the Silk Road. The procession through the streets of Chang'an becomes a parade of wonder, as curious citizens gather to examine the returning caravan. Children point at the foreign goods with eyes wide with amazement, their fingers tracing patterns in Persian carpets that tell stories of gardens that exist only in paradise. Scholars emerge from their studies to examine the books and instruments, their excitement palpable as they recognize treasures that will advance their understanding of the world beyond measure. In the merchant quarter, Jiang Hui's warehouse awaits like a patient wife, its familiar walls and floors suddenly seeming small and confining after the vast spaces of desert and mountain. His servants, grown older in his absence, receive the goods with the reverence due to treasures that have traveled farther than most men will journey in a lifetime. The silk merchant, who was Jiang Hui's neighbor, greets him with the formal courtesy appropriate to one who has returned from the realm of legend. "We heard rumors," he says, his voice carefully neutral. "Tales of cities that exist at the edge of the world, of merchants who trade in goods so exotic they seem like the products of dreams. Tell us, are these stories true?" Jiang Hui looks at his neighbor, this man who has never ventured beyond the city walls, who considers a journey to the provincial capital an adventure worthy of boasting. How can he explain that the world is so much larger than any of them ever imagined, that human civilization extends far beyond the borders of the Middle Kingdom, that wonder and beauty exist in forms that challenge every assumption about the possible? "The stories are true," he says simply, "and they are also inadequate. The reality of the Western lands exceeds anything that words can capture." In the evenings, when the heat of the day gives way to the gentle warmth of night, Jiang Hui walks through the familiar streets of his childhood with eyes that see everything anew. The tea houses where he once gathered with friends now seem provincial, their conversations limited by the narrow scope of experience that comes from never having ventured beyond the known. The temples where he once prayed now feel confining, their cosmology challenged by the evidence of his own eyes, that the world is vast beyond the comprehension of any single faith or philosophy. His wife greets him with joy, tempered by the recognition that the man who has returned is not the same man who departed 2 years ago. She sees it in the way he looks at familiar objects as if seeing them for the first time, in the careful deliberation with which he chooses his words, in the moments when his attention seems to drift toward horizons that exist beyond the courtyard walls. "You have changed," she observes, not with accusation but with the gentle sadness of one who recognizes that some transformations cannot be undone. The road changes all who travel it, Jiang Wei replies, his voice carrying the weight of experiences that cannot be shared, only remembered. I am still your husband, still the father of your children, still the man who loves this house and this city and this life, but I am also something more, a citizen of the world, a bridge between civilizations, a keeper of memories that span continents. The young trader from Kashgar establishes himself in a modest shop near the market, his goods attracting customers who come not merely to purchase, but to hear stories of the lands that exist beyond the western mountains. He speaks to them of the astronomical instruments of Isfahan, the carpets of Samarkand, the libraries of Baghdad, where the knowledge of the world is preserved and advanced by scholars whose minds span the breadth of human inquiry. His words plant seeds in the minds of his listeners, particularly the young men whose eyes begin to hold the same fever that once burned in his own. They ask questions about routes and markets, about the capital required for such a journey, about the courage needed to face the unknown. Some will follow in his footsteps, carrying goods and dreams westward along the same routes he has traveled, adding their own stories to the endless narrative of the Silk Road. Mahmud the Persian prepares for his final departure, his arrangements made with the careful precision of a man who has learned to plan for every contingency. He will journey no farther than the Persian territories, will spend his remaining years in Isfahan, or perhaps in his birthplace of Nishapur, surrounded by gardens where the scent of roses reminds him of all the beauty he has witnessed in a lifetime spent in motion. Before he leaves, he summons Jiang Wei to his temporary lodgings for a final conversation. The room is filled with the accumulated treasures of his career, carpets and manuscripts, instruments and jewelry, each piece carrying memories of the city where it was acquired, the merchant who sold it, the caravan that carried it safely across hostile terrain. The road has been good to us, Mahmud says, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man who has lived fully and without regret. We have seen wonders that few men witness, have participated in the great conversation between civilizations that is the true treasure of the Silk Road. We have carried more than goods between East and West. We have carried dreams and knowledge, friendship and understanding. He presents Jiang Wei with a gift, a small astrolabe crafted in Damascus, its brass surface engraved with verses from Persian poets, its function both practical and symbolic. For navigation, he says with a smile that has grown weathered but not diminished by the years, both of the stars and of the soul. As spring turns to summer in Chang'an, the city settles back into its familiar rhythms, but the influence of the returned merchants spreads like ripples from stones thrown into still water. The astronomical instruments they have brought begin to revolutionize Chinese understanding of celestial mechanics. The mathematical treatises introduce concepts that advance scholarship by generations. The carpets and textiles inspire new patterns in Chinese workshops, their foreign motifs gradually being absorbed into the visual vocabulary of the Middle Kingdom. Jiang Wei finds himself consulted by officials who seek to understand the implications of the knowledge he has brought back. The Ministry of Works examines his Persian architectural drawings, seeking to incorporate new engineering techniques into imperial construction projects. The Imperial Academy studies his Arabic mathematical texts, their scholars struggling to master concepts that will transform Chinese mathematics. The Bureau of Astronomy pores over his astrolabes and star charts, their calculations suddenly achieving new levels of precision. But it is not only knowledge that the merchants have brought back. They have also carried westward the essence of Chinese civilization, seeding distant markets with goods that will create demand for future caravans. In Isfahan and Baghdad, Damascus and Samarkand, merchants now stock Chinese silk and porcelain, tea and medicinal herbs, creating commercial relationships that will endure for generations. The cycle begins anew as fresh caravans form in the merchant quarter, their organizers consulting with the returned travelers who can provide current information about routes and markets, political conditions, and commercial opportunities. Young men with fever in their eyes and dreams in their hearts sign contracts that will take them beyond the western horizon, their families bidding them farewell with the same mixture of pride and terror that has marked such departures since the first merchant decided that profit was worth the risk of everything he held dear. Jiang Wei watches these new caravans depart with emotions that mirror those he felt upon his own return. Joy at their courage, sadness at their innocence, hope that they will find what they seek in the vast spaces between civilizations. He knows that some will not return, that the road claims its tribute from every generation that dares to challenge its distances. But he also knows that those who do survive the journey will come back transformed, carrying with them not merely goods, but expanded understanding of human possibility. The sun sets over Chang'an, painting the familiar walls in shades of gold and rose, and the city prepares for sleep. In his courtyard, Jiang Wei sits beside the fountain his prophets have enabled him to build, its waters reflecting stars that he now knows shine over markets and cities, deserts and mountains that stretch far beyond the boundaries of any single empire. The astrolabe given to him by Mahmud rests in his hands, its brass surface warm from his touch, its graduated scales mapping the movements of celestial bodies that wheel overhead in patterns as ancient as human desire to understand the cosmos. He thinks of the friends he has left behind in distant cities, of the knowledge that flows along trade routes like water finding its own level, of the endless human hunger for connection that transforms mere commerce into something approaching sacred ritual. The Silk Road stretches away into the darkness, invisible but eternal, carrying its burden of dreams and goods, knowledge and friendship, across distances that seem to exist outside the normal boundaries of time and space. Jiang Wei has walked that road and returned, but in a deeper sense he knows that he will never truly leave it. It has become part of him, woven into his being like the threads of silk that first drew him westward, binding him forever to the brotherhood of those who have looked beyond the horizon and dared to seek what lies beyond the edge of the known world. The night wind carries the scent of jasmine from his garden, and in that perfume, he imagines he can detect traces of rose water from Isfahan, incense from Damascus, the salt tang of distant seas that lap shores he has never seen but now knows exist. The world is vast and wonderful, and connected in ways that span the boundaries of nations and empires, and he has been privileged to serve as one small thread in the great tapestry that binds human civilization together. Sleep comes gently, filled with dreams of caravans that move like ships across seas of sand, of cities that rise from distant plains like mirages made manifest, of the endless road that calls to every generation with promises of profit and adventure, knowledge and transformation. The Silk Road never truly ends. It lives on in the memories of those who have traveled it, in the goods that carry its influence to distant markets, in the dreams of those who have yet to answer its call. And in the silence of the sleeping city, if one listens carefully, one can hear the sound of camel bells carried on the night wind, the whispered prayers of merchants preparing for departure, the eternal rhythm of the road that connects the rising sun to its setting, the familiar to the foreign, the known to the unknowable. The Silk Road endures, patient and eternal, waiting for the next dreamer brave enough to risk everything in pursuit of the wonders that lie beyond the western horizon. The end of one journey, the beginning of another, the eternal cycle of the Silk Road spinning on through the centuries, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of all who dare to believe that somewhere beyond the next mountain range, beyond the next desert, lies a treasure worth the risk of everything they hold dear. The merchants sleep, but the road does not. In the gentle hours before dawn, when the world holds its breath between night and day, The Silk Road lives on in the dreams of those who have walked its lengths and in the hopes of those who will answer its call in generations yet to come. For the Silk Road is more than a trade route. It is a testament to the human spirit's refusal to accept limitations, a bridge built from courage and ambition that spans the vast distances between civilizations. It carries not merely goods, but the essence of human connection, the eternal desire to reach beyond the known, to risk everything in pursuit of dreams that glitter like stars in the darkness of the unknown. And so the caravans continue their eternal procession, carrying silk and spices, knowledge and friendship, dreams and transformations across the roof of the world. The road endures, patient and eternal, a golden thread that binds east to west, past to future, the human heart to its infinite capacity for wonder and discovery. Rest now, traveler. Let your dreams be filled with the gentle sound of camel bells and the whispered promises of distant horizons. The Silk Road will be there when you wake, waiting with infinite patience for the next dreamer brave enough to answer its call. In the name of all who have walked the road before us, and all who will walk it after we are dust, may your journey be safe, your profits fair, and your returns blessed with the wisdom that comes only to those who dare to seek the wonders that lie beyond the edge of the world.